Got a lot to talk about later on today, and that coming from Greg Sankey, Eli Drinkowitz, Lane Kiffin, and then Brian Kelly. First up, Matt, I know a lot of people were excited to see what he has today in your neck of the woods, and I'm excited too. And we will get to him, but I want to know about Jayden Daniels and what you've heard about him. Kid comes over from Arizona State, had some good statistics there. How is he going to fit into the mold that is the SEC?
Yeah, so I'm probably maybe a little more bullish on Jayden Daniels than most people in Baton Rouge. You get a lot of support from Miles Brennan because he's a feel-good, right? He's been around for 6 years, and he's battled some injuries, and it's just so rare that you have a guy, especially at that position, stay for 6 years. And then you have a lot of people that are really excited about Garrett Nussmeier, who's kind of maybe the tantalizing, unknown, the young, talented guy. But my contention is Brian Kelly and his staff wouldn't have gone and gotten Jayden Daniels if they were thrilled with the quarterback room they had. Daniels has started 30 career games. He actually fits the mold of what Brian Kelly's offenses kind of looked like. If you think some of his quarterbacks at Notre Dame, from Everett Golson or Malik Zaire or Ian Book, guys that could make plays with their feet. And he fits that mold with a lot of experience. So he came in the spring from Arizona State. I mean, he was on campus for like a week before they started spring drills. So it was a little bit of a transition. The one knock you'll hear is accuracy, but boy, his ability to make plays with his feet is pretty electric. And I am going to be very interested to see, the first couple of weeks of fall camp, how that quarterback battle plays out, because I really think that's going to be the tipping point one way or the other for the whole LSU season.
And there's a couple of quarterback competitions that I think a lot of people were excited about. Not really one at Arkansas, but that LSU being one of them. And talking about fit, you seem to think Jayden Daniels is going to be a good fit under Brian Kelly's system. Brian Kelly at LSU, when that initially hired, it just on the optics didn't fit. He's a great coach, good with X's and O's, but I just couldn't see him. And I know it's a learning curve, timetable. Like Ed Ogeron fit LSU. Sam Pittman fits Arkansas. This guy's a winner. How is he going to acclimate, understand the recruiting culture, eat more gumbo, do all that? How long is that going to take, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's going to be way easier than most people think.
Okay.
Because I've obviously answered this question a lot, but the three winningest coaches in the history of LSU athletics, any sport. You had Skip Bertman, who won 5 baseball national titles. He's a Jewish guy from Detroit who grew up in Miami. Okay.
Didn't know that.
You've got, and of course, Baton Rouge in South Louisiana is very heavily Spanish, French, Catholic. You've got Dale Brown, who is the second winningest coach in the history of SEC basketball behind only Adolph Rupp. He's from Minot, North Dakota. And then, of course, Nick Saban, who spent his career in the Midwest before he came to LSU in 2000. All worked out okay. If you win, it don't matter where you're from. You've just got to commit yourself to wrapping your arms around the culture, and people will love you if you win. So it really doesn't matter where Brian Kelly is from. Now, functionally, to answer your question, he did a very smart thing, and I think a very self-aware thing. He broke his staff basically in half people that know him really well and his style and what he wants to do, and the other half that are deeply rooted in Louisiana and know the high school coaches, the recruiting scene, all of the things that you described. So we'll see if it works, and I'm sure he'll have to tweak along the way.
Yeah. Matt, sometimes you can have a first year that doesn't meet the expectations to the top level on the field if you have a good recruiting class coming in the next year. And just already looking at what's stacking up for LSU in 23, that should relieve a little pressure with 2 top 100 players, including Jaylen Brown, that's coming to the program. Give us some insight as to what has went right so far for Brian Kelly and how he's getting that message out you were speaking of in recruiting, because it seems to me he's relieving a little bit of the pressure off his first year by having a great 23 class lining up now.
Yeah, I think what's worked well for them early is the fact that they have leveraged the relationships that they had, right? So you look at Jamar Cain, for example, defensive line coach who comes in from Oklahoma. Well, a lot of the kids that he was recruiting at Oklahoma had LSU offers. So it was very easy for him to say, hey, I was recruiting you to Oklahoma. You want to come look at LSU? And so they popped 4 defensive line commits. Cortez Hankton was at Georgia. So you mentioned Jaylen Brown, the receiver from Miami. Cortez Hankton was recruiting Jaylen Brown to Georgia and just kind of flipped him over to LSU. So I think that's what they've done well early. But one thing that they've got to do, and every LSU team that's ever had great success, you look at the national title teams, they're rooted in Louisiana players. It's all about, the narrative is put a fence around the state, keep the best players home. And, 4 of the top 5 players in the state, maybe 7 of the top 10 aren't even considering LSU in this class. So some of that is circumstance. Like Arch Manning was just never ever going to come to LSU, never gave LSU a look. But Brian Kelly's going to have to get the best players in Louisiana to stay home. And when we look back in February when the bow was put on this class, that's what we're going to look at and say, okay, how many of the best players in the state was this staff able to keep in Louisiana? And that's ultimately going to be the telltale over the course of his tenure.
When I'm looking at the schedule, you got the bye week in front of Alabama, which has become tradition for really both schools, and Arkansas after Bama. Where's the key stretch? Is it Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, or Florida, and Ole Miss? Or where do you define the key moments of the schedule this year for LSU?
Yeah, I think LSU, you're going to look at October, and that's when you go home away, and you've got the road games against Florida and Auburn, the home game against Tennessee mixed in there. LSU's got a really good chance. If they can beat Mississippi State early, they got a good chance to. And I do think they'll beat Florida State in the opener, by the way. They have a really good chance to get off and get some momentum early, but October is going to define what, if anything, they're playing for in November when they go to Tuscaloosa, and then after that, obviously, the Arkansas game. So it's hard to look away. And I know, look, new coach at Florida, Auburn's obviously had their issues with Brian Harsin. He almost got run this offseason. Tennessee throws for a bajillion yards and probably will again this year with Hendon Hooker. But anytime you got to go to Auburn and Florida, I just don't think you can ever, no matter what struggles they have, I just don't think you can ever just take your Sharpie and scribble a W. It's just, though, I've seen too many, tough games in those road environments to assume anything. So really how LSU fares in that stretch in October, and really their 4 road conference games. I know it's cliche to say it, but that's going to define this season.
Matt Moscona with us, ESPN 104.5, Baton Rouge, talking a little LSU. Matt, I kind of want more of your overall arching perspective on the West Side. Now, at one point, initially when my first one, I came in with the list of my 7.
Okay.
And now I have found that as I listen more, and maybe my opinion is swayed, but I wait till the final day to actually put in my rankings. Have you come to a conclusion on how you're going to rank the West, or is this something you're just going to wait and see what people say and then make a decision?
I have not come to a conclusion. The one thing I know is Alabama's going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a consensus, right? That's just what we're all going to do. I really do. Usually you have a little bit of a known, right? When we come here, everyone would always put Bama first, and then it's either like an LSU Auburn, position there in the second slot. I think Texas A&M's fascinating. Because Max Johnson was the LSU quarterback, transferred over. Mm-hmm. Don't even know if he's going to win the job there. But Jimbo goes into year 5, and you got to feel like, brother, if you're going to make your move, you got to make your move eventually. Like, you can't just keep existing in this perennial 8-4, blob for, you're not good or bad forever. They're paying you $100 million. At some point, you got to make your move. And it feels like maybe this is the year where you do it or the heat gets cranked up on him. But I could make a case for A&M with all the talent they've recruited taking that step. I could make a case for LSU, despite all the personnel turnover. Brian Kelly, winning coach, recruited a bunch of veteran college football players, and it comes together similar to how I think Michigan State a year ago.
Now, how many Mel Tucker bring in? Like 20?
Yeah, but that's basically what Brian Kelly had to do. He brought in 15 transfers,
wow.
And all of them. Well, you guys know. You guys know about Fouché and Brooks. I could make the case, right? But I think there's a counter argument. I could make a case that KJ Jefferson has an awesome year, and Sam Pittman takes that next step. I think the West is a little trickier than ever to figure out, and I don't know. It may just be one of those things where everyone just cannibalizes each other in the West, and and you have that maybe Bama has the great season, everyone else ends up in that sort of 3 and 4 loss blob I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned KJ Jefferson, Matt. We think highly of him as Arkansas Sports Radio guys, getting the chance to watch his progression last year. I know he didn't have his best game in Baton Rouge, but they did end up
that game
winning.
was hideous.
Yeah.
That game was terrible.
No offense whatsoever. A Cam Little game-winning field goal. But kind of your thoughts, and maybe you're talking about Sam Pittman and company taking the next step. How much are you thinking KJ takes a step into his next season as starting quarterback of Arkansas?
I think KJ Jefferson's a really good player. I'm not sure that I would consider KJ a Heisman candidate type player.
Okay.
Could he lead Arkansas to a 9-win season and a New Year's 6? You get to 10. I think that's possible. For all the reasons we just said. Could Arkansas beat LSU up in Fayetteville this year? Absolutely. Could Arkansas clip the rest of the West? Sure. I like the draw from the East as well. So it's like, yeah. I think not knowing the roster 1 to 85 the way you guys do. It's a very obvious question. Like, how do you replace Traylon Burks? Right. You lose a big time receiver like that as a first round pick. But I like KJ Jefferson. I think there's tons of value in having, obviously, a veteran starting quarterback in an era where you don't always get consistency under center, right? There's so much, transfer portal play and everything. But yeah, I'm a little. I know I sound kind of iffy, but that's how I feel about the West. It's really hard to figure out because I could for sure make a case that KJ Jefferson throws for 4,000 yards this year, and Arkansas wins 10 games. I could see that and wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't hate that, Matt.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah. Are we convinced that Mike Leach is going to pop off and win 10 games this year? I'm not. What about Lane Kiffin with a new starting quarterback replacing Matt Corral? Everybody's got really big questions. It's just a matter of who's going to most adequately answer those questions.
So with all those questions, and many of them at quarterback and transfer and all of these things, is this the year that finally in our lifetimes we see someone win the Heisman Trophy twice in their college career?
I'm going to say no, because when you win it, the standard becomes so high. And even if you go back and look, Matt Leinart, for me, was probably the best. I know Tebow had an amazing career and probably should have won it in 2008 as well. But Matt Leinart was one where if you go and look, he won it in 2004 and had a better season in 2005, but Reggie Bush won it. So teammates went back-to-back. But it just when you win it, the standard becomes so high. So, how does Bryce Young best what he did a year ago? I just don't know how he does that. And usually someone like Bryce Young or like Joe Burrow, who we're not talking about today, is the one that's going to step up and have that amazing season and win over voters in November. So I don't think so, just because I think there's a reason why we've only seen it happen once in history.
Yeah, you wonder if it's pressure or if it's a jinx, so to speak, but you still think Alabama, and I think a lot of people think Alabama can still get to the college football playoff, win the SEC, all the things you need to do to have a championship season, even if Bryce Young doesn't do that, Matt.
Well, I know it's rinse and repeat, but it's true. It's just Nick's been the pillar of consistency in college football. He is the greatest coach that college football has ever seen. In my opinion, I think the opinion of many others, that he has surpassed Bear Bryant in that respect, not only because of the number of titles, but doing it in the era in which he's done it, where it's harder than ever, where you've got to win more games, you have to win a conference championship game, you have to win a playoff game. Now you have transfer portal. There's just been nobody that's ever adapted to the changing landscape of college football better than Nick, and it's why Alabama's always going to be there. So I don't, even if Bryce Young doesn't have another Heisman season, I think he'll be a finalist. I think Bama's going to go 11-1, and they'll be in the playoff, and Bryce Young will have a seat in New York. I'm just betting on history to say that I think someone else will probably win it, because we've only seen repeat winner once.
There's a couple quarterbacks by the name of C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams that are going to have something to say about that this year. Well, Matt, as always, man, we appreciate you joining us at SEC Media Days. Excited to get this thing rolling, and excited to see what Brian Kelly has to say today.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, good stuff from Matt Moscona, ESPN 104.5 in Baton Rouge. Does a great job in their afternoon drive program.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's Wimbledon Finals, Major League Baseball, the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV to get the bonus and get into the action. Bet online, where the game starts.